Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to be with you today, and I'm excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is product management. So let's get this presentation going. All right. So I want to talk to you today about something that I'm really passionate about, which is the history and the evolution of product management, where we started from, where we're going, and what we can all do to get out of what I call the build trap that I'm going to explain to you today. So first, I want to back up and tell you a little bit about how I got into product management. So when I started out as a product manager, I didn't really know what that was. This is over 10 years ago. I was, graduating school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, studying engineering. And I had done a little bit of graphic design work. I had done a bunch of engineering work. And my friend at a company said, hey, you can join us and be a product manager. I was like, great. What is that? What do people do? And they told me that my job there was to go to the business, gather all the requirements on what we should build for our customers, build all these beautiful specification documents, write it all up in Word, put all the pictures in it, make sure it looks perfect, and then ship it off to the engineers, and then it would get built. And let me tell you something. I was really, really good at this. I was so great at writing these specification documents. I was so detailed that I never had to talk to the engineers. I actually found one of these spec docs from a while ago, and it was 21 pages long for changing your password. And I was told that I was a great product manager because I never had to talk to the engineers. All the details were in there, and I had every little detail possible. So I thought, all right, I got this, right? Like, I am the best product manager. I can do this. This is my career. So I eventually left this company. I went on to another company, and I joined a startup. I made my way over to the startup, and the person who brought me in to that startup used to be the CTO of this company. And he said, do what you did for me at Capital IQ, build the specification documents, send them to this team in Nashville. There are the developers. Let's get going. And it was an e-commerce platform. So I got to work, and I wrote all these beautiful spec docs, made something that was, I think, about 30 to 40 pages for one of the first things we were building. And I was in charge of all the internal tools. And I shipped it off to the engineers about 3 weeks later. And I waited and waited. And about a month later, they said, okay, it's ready for you to look at. Go in, start QAing, make sure it looks right. And I get in there, and it looks nothing like I spec'd out. Nothing that I had put in there was on there. And I was like, guys, didn't you read that specification document? And they go, oh, that thing? No way did I read that. It was too long. It was like 40 pages long. Are you kidding me? No, I just glanced at it and I built what I wanted to build. So now I'm having a crisis because I'm like, if my job was to build specification documents and the engineers won't read them, what do I do? Like, literally, what do I do? What is my job? And we started fighting about it. I was like, you're going to have to read them. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to find a better way. So we're fighting back and forth. We're not getting along. Nothing's going well. Everybody's really, really upset. And one of the team members, his name was Jared, he said, hey, why don't we try this thing called Agile? Let's give it a shot. What happens is we're going to collaborate a little bit more together. We're going to break down things so that you don't write these huge specification documents. We're going to learn to work better together. And I said, you know what? Anything at this point is good because we all hate each other and nothing is going well. So he taught us some basic Scrum. We had our backlogs that I managed. We broke things down into stories. We had our cadences. We met every week to go over what we were going to build and break it down. And we found that this worked pretty well for us. We were very not dogmatic about it. I didn't even know there was such thing as story points till years later. But what we found was that by sitting down together and looking at what we were going to build, instead of me writing it all up front, we started to work better together. We started to communicate better. And we became a really well-functioning team. So they started giving us harder and harder projects to work on at the company. And one of those projects that came up was building this dashboard for these sellers. So we were a two-sided e-commerce marketplace, kind of like your Etsy's of the world, where we had sellers on there to come in and put their stuff online, and then we sold it to our audience. And these sellers were usually celebrities, people like Martha Stewart or Bobby Flay. They would put their pans on it or pick out things that they wanted to sell. So we would do all the sourcing, figure it out, and then we'd split the revenues with them. And at the time, we were just, about a year old. So we're just getting started. We didn't have everything built. And the CEO said, all right, I need you guys to go build a dashboard for these sellers. They're managing their businesses, they're making money off of this. But what they're doing is calling us to learn everything. What am I selling today? How much money am I making? All of those things. So I said, okay. So I went to the sellers and I asked them, what do you want to see on this dashboard? And I wrote down this really big list of things. They were like, I want to see revenue and cost of goods sold and all the margins. And I want to see what I'm selling. And I want all these tweet links. And I want this, the list of people who are buying, all of these things. So we spent about 3 months breaking this down and building it. And at the end of 3 months, we were like, here it is. Here's everything you ever wanted, right? Go use it. Here's how you get on. We onboarded everybody. We gave them the links. We sent them out to use it. And this is the first time I actually ever measured anything. We put Google Analytics on it. I could start tracking if people were logging in. So I watched and I waited. And one day goes by and I see a bunch of people log in. And I'm like, yes, okay, people are using it. Second day goes by. Nobody's logging in. A week goes by. Nobody's logging in. A month goes by. Nobody's logging in. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, we built them everything that they wanted. Like, why are they not logging in? Like, why are they not using this thing? So I started to call them. I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, you asked me for all these things. And they said, what is all this stuff? Like, I know I said I wanted revenue, but all I really care about is profit. I don't actually want to see all the people who are buying. I just want to see the comments that they're leaving on there so I can respond to questions. I don't really care about 90% of this stuff. And I'm like, but you asked for it. And they're like, but it doesn't matter to me. And this is the first time that I realized we were stuck in something that I call the build trap. And I probably have been stuck there before. I just didn't know it because I never measured the results of what we were doing. And the build trap is a scary place where a lot of companies get stuck. It's when you're building and building and building things and releasing to customers and not stopping to think, is this the right thing to actually release? Is this the right thing for our customers? Does it actually solve a problem? Tons of companies get stuck in the build trap. You could be a large company stuck in the build trap. You could be a small company stuck in the build trap, but we all end up there one day or another. The question is, how do we get out of it? How do we start focusing on what's valuable for customers and make sure we're shipping that and not just anything? So before we figure out how to get out of it, we have to figure out, how do we get in it? How do we all get stuck in the build trap where we're just building and shipping and building and shipping and never really measuring success? And I think it's a systemic thing. I believe it first starts here, that we misinterpret what we're actually building and why we're building it. So a lot of companies think the more ideas we have, the more specifications we build, the more things in our backlog, the faster we can code fingers on typeboard, the more money we make. And they see this as a linear process. So what do? We optimize that middle piece where we just optimize the coding. How fast can we develop this? How fast can we ship this? And we turn to processes like Agile and continuous deployment and all of these wonderful things. So what do? We keep adding and adding to the backlog, more and more ideas to put into the system, but we never take things away. So all of our products end up as a hodgepodge of complexity. What started as a copier then turns into a printer, and then we're like, hey, let's just shove a scanner in it because why not? And you know what's great? A stapler. Yeah, let's make this staple automatically. And when was the last time you stood in front of one of these things and figured out how to use it automatically? It's hard. I cannot figure out how to use these things for the life of me. And that's why this is still relevant from 1999. So we're building and we're shipping and we're building and we're shipping and we're adding and adding complexity to our products. And it's interesting, where does this come from? And a lot of people think, and I believe, that some of it has to do with our interpretation of Agile. So I was sitting with Jeff Patton at Mind the Product, which is one of the largest conferences for product managers in the world, a couple of years ago. And we had David Cancel on stage. He's a product leader talking about stuff. And he goes, oh, I'm not even going to get into Agile. No, I don't even care about that. I don't even want to start there. And people start snickering. They were like, hey, please talk about Agile. And he goes, okay, fine. I hate Agile. It's all points and velocity. No one talks about the customer. And 1,400 people started applauding and cheering. And Jeff and I turned to each other and went, whew, I think we have a problem here. I don't think people really understand Agile and are adopting it well. And this was interesting to me because when I learned Agile, it worked really well for my team. So I was a huge proponent of it. But as I started working with more and more companies, I realized that a lot of them are just adopting Scrum practices, but not adopting the great product management practices that go with it. And so product management doesn't get practiced there. The thing we have to realize is that Scrum doesn't have a brain. Scrum is really good at telling you how to work together, how to break down your work, but it's not going to tell you what's the right thing to build. That's another piece of the puzzle. And yet, so many companies adopt Scrum just thinking that it's going to solve all of their problems. So Scrum can tell you how to build things, but they're never going to tell you what to build. And yet, a lot of people come to product management for the first time through the role of a product owner in Scrum. So when they go to all these Scrum trainings, though, they're learning what they need to do in a Scrum world. They're not learning all the things that come before it, like talking to your customers, doing great discovery work, figuring out if there's a business case around this, figuring out what the market sizes are, what the strategy should be. They're learning how to manage backlogs. So we need to remember that product owner is a role you play on a Scrum team. Take away Scrum. Use Kanban, use anything else, extreme programming, whatever you want. You still have to be a product manager at the end of the day. That is your job. So how do we get back to focusing on what the job is of a product manager, and how does that really relate in our world in the way that we, as we work as software teams? Well, I think it starts from the beginning. I think it starts by fundamentally understanding how we create value in our world. So let's go back to basics, all the way back to the beginning. On one side, we've got customers, and they have problems, wants, and needs. And then we have businesses who deliver products and services to fulfill those problem, wants, and needs. But it's not until those problems, wants, and needs go away, till they're fulfilled, till they're solved, that a customer actually realizes value. There's no inherent value in a feature, in a product, and in a service in and of itself if it does not solve a problem for a customer. Once a customer has value, they give us value back in return, usually in the form of money or time or something that you exchange for currency, and that's how we get business value. So the job of a product manager, the job of product management in a company, is to really figure out how do we maximize business value through solving problems for customers and maximizing their value. So at the end of the day, we need to remember that solving big problems for customers is what creates big value for business. That's where this all lies. So in order to do that well in a company, we need many components set up for our product management to thrive. We need a strategy that aligns the team around what to build and what's valuable for our customers. We need a process that allows us to do the discovery work and figure out what we should be building. And we need an organization that really supports that and works towards measures of success. So let's start with strategy. So strategy is one of the key things that I see make or break any company with product management. And that's why we're starting there, because it serves as your direction on what you should be building, and it aligns all of your teams. So I want to tell you a little bit of story of a company that I worked with. It was a meal kit delivery company. And when I came in, there was a very clear direction. They said, we need to be able to double acquisition by the end of the year. We're doing really well with retention. We've got a group of people who are using this product, but we got to scale. We got to figure out what's preventing us from scaling faster than we can right now. So the way this company works is all the ingredients, all the recipes are shipped straight to your door, and then you can pick them up, start to cook it, have a very delicious meal. So we're sitting there trying to figure out how do we increase acquisition, and we ran into this problem where we're trying to figure out how to get in touch with customers. So we're a B2C company. All these customers are out there. They're coming to our site. We're not capturing any information. And then it's just kind of falling off, and we don't know, we don't know where they're going. We don't know why they're leaving. So we're sitting there trying to figure out what experiment to run. And the CTO of this company walks in, starts listening, sits down in the middle of my meeting, uninvited, not happy about this. And he butts in and he goes, what is your product strategy? And I said, what do you mean? We're trying to figure out how to get in touch with the customers, to figure out why they're not signing up. How do we do user research around that? And he goes, no. I want to document with every field you intend to put on the site and the content strategy so that I can build a back end that will make us easier to update the site. I was like, that is not a strategy. That's not a strategy. And he didn't want a strategy. He just wanted a list of things that we were going to build. And this is true in a lot of companies. They misinterpret what product strategy is. Most product strategies that I see are a wish list of features. First, we're going to build that, then we're going to build this, and we're going to build this, and then we're going to put the button there. And then we take all of those things and we shove it into a Gantt chart, which is mostly made up because we have no idea how long these things are going to take. And then we say, okay, we're done, right? That's it. That is our product strategy. And that's not true. And the problem with this way of working is that we fail to recognize the uncertainty around building products. Creating new products is full of uncertainty. We have to answer so many questions. We have to answer, who is our customer? What is their problem? What are they doing now to solve our problem? Why is that not working? Why is it subpar? Where are they getting stuck? What's the context in which they're using it? Are they on the go? Are they somewhere else? There's so many questions we need to answer before we can actually build a great product strategy. So at the end of the day, product strategy is not a plan. That's not how it works. We can't treat it that way. Strategy is a framework. So one of the best definitions I've seen of product strategy is by Stephen Bungay, who wrote The Art of Action. Phenomenal book, especially if you're working in a strategic position in your company. Tells you all about how people inform strategy, problems where strategy is not there, what they cause in the company. Totally recommend it. Art of Action. So what he says is strategy is a deployable decision-making framework enabling action to achieve desired outcomes constrained by current capabilities coherently aligned to the existing context. That is a mouthful. That is a mouthful for saying that strategy is a framework. And strategy is a framework that's based on where we are now, where we want to go, and it allows people at all levels of the organization to make decisions. And that's really, really important. A great strategy in a company, a great product strategy in a company allows the teams to make decisions. It's not about somebody at management just dictating down what to build. It's giving them the ability to explore different areas to figure out what's the right path. So strategy deployment in companies looks something like this when we get into product strategy. I see 4 main levels of this, and it's per business line, it's per vision of the business line that you're doing. In a corporation, you're probably going to have one more layer of a corporate strategy, but this is a company strategy. And at the top, we've got our vision of where we want the company to go. What do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? What's our value for customers? What's our position in the market? How do we differentiate? What do we want to double down on? This is set by the CEO and senior leadership. And then underneath that, we have strategic intents. And these are what are the business challenges that are standing in the way of us reaching our vision. So these are things like entering new markets, going down market, going up market. They're things that make a big push from a business level to get us more market share, more TAM, or even reduce costs. So things that are really settling into those business levels there. Then we get into what does the product do to help us reach those strategic intents? And that's where the product management pieces come in. So we're aligning the product portfolio around product initiatives, which are what are the big problems that we can address to tackle these business challenges. And that's where your product leadership team comes in. And then the team is figuring out the options on how to tackle those problems. So what can we build? What are the features? What are the solutions really look like for us to be able to go after those problems and solve them well? So when we actually looked at the CTO, when he came to us and said, what is our product strategy? This is what we ended up doing. He said, what is your product strategy? And we said, no, we're not going to give you this whole list of content. We don't know what that is. So let's start from the beginning and build our framework. So as a company, they had just gone through a little bit of work to figure out how do we differentiate. Tons of meal kits in the market, tons of people like HelloFresh, all these big ones. And they have a ton of market share. So they said, how are we going to be different? And the senior leadership came up with this. They said, in 5 years, our company will be the meal kit with the most choices, so the most different options for dinner, and the most convenience in the market. So you can pick it up wherever you want to go to get dinner. Grocery stores, have it delivered, whatever works for you. So those are the 2 places they're doubling down. The strategic intent was that they had to double their acquisition of new customers while maintaining retention. So they had been scaling, and then they hit this plateau where acquisition wasn't going up. And they said, if we want to survive, if we want to keep going because of the margins of this business, we got to double our acquisition. So product leaders, the purpose is to provide a vision, goals, and guardrails. Guardrails are things that constrain your team enough so that they can make decisions within the boundaries. So they're not going over to left field, coming up with these ideas, and you're like, yeah, that has nothing to do with what we're doing. So for us, a guardrail was that we couldn't lower prices. That would kill our margins. So it's like you have to keep the price the same. So you want to think through, what are your guardrails? What's in, what's out of bounds from a big perspective to constrain the box enough for the teams to go figure out what to build. And setting this product strategy, setting those vision, goals, and guardrails, that promotes alignment. And if you don't have alignment, you cannot have autonomous teams. Huge thing in Agile that we talk about, autonomous teams, autonomy, coming up with what to build. If you do not have a product strategy, you cannot have autonomy, because everybody will be going in a million different directions. And that's typically what we see in organizations with no product strategy. We come in, I ask them, what are you building? Why are you building it? And if you go up all the way to the chain, nobody's aligned. And you got these teams running around, building everything they possibly can build, but nothing is getting done. None of the goals are being met. So to escape the build trap, we need to drive high alignment through a good strategy framework that allows teams to make decisions. And that's the only way we really can scale. You can't scale organizations if you don't have autonomous teams. You'd have to hire a million middle-level managers to just dictate what to build to the teams, and that's worthless. Hiring smart people, give them the tools that they need to go make decisions and succeed. Create the product strategy, do the work so that they can do that. But product strategy just cannot be made. Like, you don't sit in a corner and make product strategy in a day, even though I've seen teams do this, it does not work. Product strategy emerges from experimentation. So we need to have a process that promotes experimentation and figuring out what is the right thing to build through good discovery frameworks. So when I came into this company, we were not at a loss for ideas on how to double the acquisition. We had a lot of ideas, right? The price is too high, we should lower it. But that was one of our guardrails. Can't do that. We will kill our margins. We won't be a business anymore. Another one was the photos are not enticing. We have a picture of a steak out there. Maybe there's vegetarians. They're getting scared by the steak. That was a conversation that we had for a couple hours. We should be offering sign-up gifts. We had a head of marketing who said, this is definitely our problem. We should put steak knives and, you know, these big chopping knives in our boxes, and people will want to sign up. And I said, that sounds very dangerous. I don't know if we should be shipping knives to people in a box. maybe that's not it. We need to rebrand the sign-up funnel to the new design. So the company had just gone through this major design overhaul. They had hired somebody in to do a complete overhaul of design, packaging, the website, and the website was beautiful. Big imagery, looks great, long scroll on a page, just images everywhere. And they said, well, we didn't get to the sign-up funnel yet. We haven't rebranded it. So that's probably why people are falling off. And then also they can't try it for free. We need a free trial. That's definitely what it is. Tons of ideas, lots of ideas. Sat around, I just remember sitting around this table with all these people coming up with these ideas. And the problem was that there was no problem. Like, these are all solutions to a problem that we don't understand. So my team said, let's take a step back, right? So we had all our product teams. We said, let's take a step back and actually measure this. And we looked at the funnel from the time that people were signing up and then all the steps that they were taking. And we found that a lot of people were coming to the website. So it's not a marketing thing. They're getting through the first two steps, and then they're falling off when they hit the address field. We were like, that's weird. And I had worked in e-commerce before, and I said, you know, I expect people to fall off when they get the price or they're about to pay, but they're not doing that. They're making it through price. They're falling off at the address, and they're not even falling off at the credit card step. So what's going on? So we found that this is a conversion problem. We're having a problem converting people, not an awareness problem, right? It's not a marketing issue. It's now a product problem. How do we get people through this conversion funnel? We said, if we can increase our conversion rate, we can get close to doubling acquisition. So that became our product initiative. We said we have to increase the conversion rate across all the platforms by a certain percentage by the end of Q2. But our product initiative is not done yet. We have to figure out how. So our team started to experiment, and we're sitting there trying to figure out how to learn this. And we had this obstacle. We said, we don't understand why people are leaving. So why are they falling off on this address step? How can we actually learn that if we have none of their information? So we're sitting there, like 2 weeks go by, and we have no idea how to get in touch with these people. We were bringing them in for some, in-house just usability tests. Nothing's coming out of it. We can't find any problems. And one day our lead developer comes up to me and he goes, hey, Melissa, I found this solution. I think we could pop it on our website and it might tell us why people are leaving. It's called Quality Room. And as you start to go towards the back button or leave, they'll slide up and say, what's stopping you from signing up today? And I said, that's great. yeah, let's put that up there. He's like, it takes 5 minutes. It's JavaScript. I'll put it up there. Be really easy. I was like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't put like an open text box. Maybe we should put like multiple choice on it. And he's like, well, I can change it in like 3 seconds. You want to just try this first? And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's just put it up there. Within 1 week, we had something like 3,000 responses. And nobody said that they needed a chef's knife in their box. Nobody said they needed a free trial. It was really basic things that were missing. 33% of people said, I cannot find the food menu. What food do you serve? Is it pasta? Is it a steak? Like, what am I getting in here? Is there vegetarian options? 25% of people said, what's in the box? Like, do I have to buy eggs? Do I need to get salt? They didn't know how a meal kit worked. About 18% of people said the price is too high, but the way they phrased it, because we left that box open-ended, was, I do not understand why you cost more than your competitors. And that was telling me that it was not necessarily a price issue. It wasn't like, wow, you're wildly expensive. It was, why? Why are you so much more money? And we were justified. We had organic food, we had higher quality meats, all of these different things, but we were not explaining it well. We weren't explaining why, us versus them. We weren't explaining our differentiating factors. And a couple of people said, I want more plan options. Like, I have a family, I can only buy 2 sets of meals. I need 3, I need 4. So all of these things are telling us that there's just not enough information on the site. We're not explaining our value proposition well. We're not explaining what we are and why we are, like why we're there. So we refined our product initiative to include that. We said we first need to create a clear experience for our customers to increase conversion rate across all the platforms. We need to tell them what they're buying and why they're buying it. So now our obstacle was that first one. 33% of people can't find the menu. And we said, that's weird because the menu is on the site. It existed. But the problem was that the menu was hidden under this hamburger button. So the hamburger button was only getting 2% of clicks on the entire site, and nobody could find the menu. And this happened during a big redesign of the site. So I told you about how they redesigned it. They made all this flat design, made it really long and scrolly and all that stuff. They hid the menu doing that, trying to make it sleek and clean and easy on mobile. And what they did is they confused people. So we said, let's run a small experiment. Let's just break out the menu page in the bar and find something else that we can slap together. And so we didn't really have a lot of pages. It was just one long scroll. But we did have FAQs and help on Zendesk. So what we did is we had menus, which was another page, FAQs and help, and we let people click through. So we A/B tested this for a few weeks. And we found that conversion rate skyrocketed when people found the menus. When they found a way to actually buy the stuff and what they were buying, it went like crazy. We almost doubled it just with that. So we said, we're on the right path here. We need to break up this navigation into more pages, put more information, and roll that out. So that's what we did. We iterated on this. We rolled out pages to address the menus, how it worked, what people were saying, and why us versus them. And by doing this, we were able to double acquisition. So our options became an expanded navigation on the top where we had more information architecture up there and better explanations on each page addressing those issues. And when we rolled that out, it went for a little bit. A couple months later, by the end of 2016, we had well over doubled acquisition. The company had a phenomenal exit to a grocery store, which was really, really good for meal kit companies, and they were able to escape the bill trap. So to escape the bill trap, we need to use the right processes and tools at the right time. Had we started where that CTO wanted us to start, which was, figuring out what the product strategy was and the content strategy and all that stuff together, we would never have figured out what those problems were. We never would have learned that people just wanted the food menu. We would have been like, okay, let's just build a back end. And we would have wasted so much time doing that and doing the wrong thing. So we need to figure out, what is it that we're supposed to learn right now? What are we trying to do, and go from there? And I see this happen at a lot of companies. For example, companies are like, prototype everything. I had a CEO at another company who told everybody that he loved prototypes. So what happened? 350 product managers started prototyping everything. I had a product manager come to office hours with me, sit down and say, all right, so I'm building 9 prototypes and I need to know where to start. I was like, why are you building 9 prototypes? And he's like, well, I just figured I'd show them to the customers who were doctors and just let them pick which ones they liked. I was like, okay, that's not the purpose of a prototype. First of all, do you know what problem you're solving? No idea. Okay, start there. Go do user research. Come back, figure out what the problem is, and then we'll mock up maybe 2 options and start to test them with our customers. So we need to remember that tools are useless unless you use them correctly. There's so many great tools out there. We've got design thinking tools, we've got prototyping tools, we've got all these different things. But knowing when to use them is way more important than just the names of these tools or wanting to use them. And this is why I like to teach people something that I call the product kata. And the product kata is that system that I just walked you through, breaking down how we discovered what the problems were with that meal kit delivery company. So you really start with that company goal. And in our case, that was doubling acquisition. And then we have to figure out, what are users doing now? What's the current state? What does it look like? And then we break that down into a smaller goal, which was our product initiative at that time, trying to increase the conversion rate and make the clearer experience. And then we do user research and experiments to figure out what is the best way to do that. And the product kata is great because it's tool agnostic. You use the right tool at the right time. What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to do? Then you pick the right tool for the situation. And the product kata is really based on learning. And learning is the thing that reduces uncertainty. We talk a lot about risk in organizations. I work with pretty much all the banks. And one of the biggest things for banks, right, are risk. We talk about this in large organizations all the time. But what's the risk of doing that? What's the risk of doing this? Not learning, working off of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk inherent in that. And we fail to recognize that all the time. And the only way to learn is to really have this cadence of discovery and delivery, discovering what the problems are, working with your customers to figure out how to solve those. That reduces risk because you're not wasting time building the wrong thing. There's a huge opportunity cost in building the wrong thing. And we need to accept that as risk in software development as well. It's not just risk of quality and things breaking, it's risk of building the wrong thing. So we need to set up an organization that really bakes in that discovery and delivery process. We need to make sure that we have a strategy that's aligning us, but we also need to make sure that we have a structure that allows us to execute on that strategy, that our whole organization has a mindset around building value with products. And that goes back, right, to our Agile conversation. So I was always really concerned about this reaction. Because when I came to Agile, I never thought product management and value creation were not in sync. Because the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, if you actually click through the link on agilemanifesto.org and go to principles, which explains a lot more than the manifesto itself, it says our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Satisfy the customer. That's a huge part of product management. So we have to ask ourselves again, if everybody's doing Agile wrong, if a lot of people are adopting Scrum and it's not working and people are frustrated, how did we get here, right? How did we all get into this position? We're planning, we're not experimenting. We're treating our colleagues as our customers a lot of times and going internally to stakeholders who yell the loudest and putting that on the backlog. We're focusing internally on our own problems rather than the customer's problems. We're all stuck in the spill trap. So how did we get there? Well, the problem is we focus more on doing the process right than building the right things. And we do this in a lot of companies because it's easy. It is easy to measure the success of doing a process right. It is really, really hard to measure the success of, I put a product out there, did it solve the problem for my customer and reach my business goals? So what we do is we start turning to measuring outputs instead of outcomes. And instead, we need to be focusing on the outcomes for our business, for our customers, for the real value there, instead of the outputs. Now, I'm not saying throw outputs out the door. You need an output to produce an outcome. But we need a mindset shift of what are we trying to do at the end of the day for our customers and for our business. And that is how we measure success. But since that's hard, so many times we just build and launch with no measures of success whatsoever. How many features have you released and the success was we got it out on time and on budget and it's just out the door and out to customers? Cool. Now what? Right? Like, are they using it? Are they not using it? Like, I didn't know people weren't using it until I started measuring it. So what happens is because we measure with no success, because we have no strategy up there, we just keep building and shoving things out and it becomes a conveyor belt of tons of products. And we focus on velocity instead of the outcomes. How fast can we shove those features out the door? So we need to figure out how to define success. And it is interesting to figure out how companies do this today. And I love this thing from Jeff Patton. I told him I was stealing it. And he does this in his workshops. And he says, he asked people to line up when we were all in person. I miss being in person with everybody, but when we were all in person, we used to have everybody line up across the room. And we said, all right, the last feature release that you put out, the last product release, if it was an utter failure, go over there. If it was a huge success, go over there. And what you find is that we've got about 20% of people over in the awful, terrible. It was not a good, not a good release. We got 20% in the awesome, great, like fantastic release, huge success. And then we got 60% of people who are what I call in the valley of meh. And the valley of meh is just like, I don't know, went out and that's cool. And what we find is that the valley of meh is where nobody really has any measurements. When awful happens, like it was an utter disaster. Sometimes it breaks. It was not the right thing. Customers complained, like very clearly there. And the people who stand in awesome usually have measures of success. So about 80% of us are not measuring success well. So this is an interesting thing too, because success for big companies is anything that's short of utter failure. And all these big companies want to adopt the mentality of a startup, right? I'm sure if you work in a large bank or if you work somewhere, they're like, how do we get startup speed or startup innovation in there? Well, the thing about startups is that anything short of utter success is a failure because they don't have enough money to just keep going, right? They don't have enough money to stand out there and keep iterating on things with no guidelines around, what to do. They'll go out of business fast. So that's why measuring real success is important and why startups who succeed because they're measuring success. Like they can't operate otherwise. But we need to adopt that in bigger companies as well. We need to make sure that we're measuring outcomes and the value for our customers and what they actually produce. And that's where this vision and strategic intent part comes together. So when the vision is set by the company well, and it's not just fluffy and doesn't make sense, and the strategic intents help align a company, now we can start to really focus. Now we can find focus and figure out what our outcomes should be. But the problem is that a lot of leadership does not take the time to do this work. And it takes a lot of time. It's not a get in a room in November and figure out what we want to build next year. That's not how this works. It takes a lot of input on market metrics, what your product is doing now, what's your cost, what's your revenue, what's your customer problems, how are your competitors doing? It's synthesizing all of this data into a direction. So this is what leadership needs to do. They need to provide the direction. They need to analyze it and figure out what are the challenges that we have as a business that we can align the teams around so they can figure out how to solve it. So to escape the bill trap, we need to create a product-led organization that has policies and practices needed to navigate uncertainty and make strategic decisions. So this means having the ability to go out and do discovery with work, having the ability to experiment and not get it right on the first try, having the ability to set strategy and have time to set strategy. All of these things helps make a more robust product strategy, product management practice. And product is really important for companies. It's one of the few departments that touch everything. In order to get product right, you need to understand marketing and how it's going to go out to your customers. You need to understand finance and how the product is going to drive finance. And some companies that are tech-enabled, it's about reducing cost or delivering value to your customers faster. In other places like a SaaS business, your product is your company, right? It's so aligned that it creates the money immediately, and there's very little differentiation there. But at the end of the day, product needs to work across every department in the organization. It can't just be siloed into IT over there. It needs to be brought up as both a business function that connects the technology together to create a strategy. And in order to succeed in today's world, every company needs to start to think about, how is my product team doing that? How is my product team helping us reach our business goals by connecting technology and enabling us to do that? So great product organizations have certain characteristics to do this. They're growing through software products rather than unrepeatable services. If you are a consulting company, you are a services business. If you are building custom software for all of your clients, you are a services business. You're now a consulting agency, right? That's not a product company. Products are repeatable. They're scalable. They can be used to address many, many different problems. They're ruthlessly focused on solving customers' and users' problems to drive business value. They're oriented around outcomes instead of outputs. They're experimental by nature and driven by continuous improvement. And they're a place where leadership enables empowered decision-making throughout all the levels. So that's what a great product organization looks like. So when you have an organization set up that really embraces those characteristics, you have a strategy that focuses everybody, sets the outcomes, and aligns them around what success actually looks like. And if you have a process to really figure out what it is that we should be building, it really comes down to people. It takes people to get out of the build trap. It takes changing your mindset, being able to question what you're doing and why you're doing it and how this is going to produce value for your business is really, really important, because it's really easy to stay in the build trap, but it's all up to all of us to take the uncomfortable step, ask the questions that need to get out of it. So thank you very much. We're going to take some questions. If you want to read my book, you can get it on Amazon at Escaping the Build Trap, also available in audiobook. And if you want a copy of these slides, email melissa@sendyourslides.com, put the subject Build Trap in there, and it will come to you. Also, we have an online school called Product Institute. It's at productinstitute.com that teaches everybody about product management for really director levels and below. If you use the code HOLIDAY, you will get $200 off right now too. So thank you very much. And we'll take questions. Great. I guess Q&A we're going to go to. All right. What are the top tricks to help leadership understand? Also, if the slides, here's the email for the slides. I'm going to put it in the chat. You're going to do melissa@sendyourslides.com. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to use this. And then put in subject Build Trap, and they will send them to you. All right, Q&A time. All right, what are your top tricks to help leadership understand the major importance of having a product strategy to gain alignment and empower a team's autonomy? So this is a big topic. So if you are not in a leadership position, this is my biggest piece of advice. It's really hard to culturally change organizations. That's what I do. Like I go in and I try to help change organizations. That's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. Tell you it's hard, even as a consultant. It's much harder to do it from within unless you're in a leadership position. But there is something that works all the time that I've seen people start to make really good shifts towards. And that is starting to ask, what do you expect to happen when we release this thing? So if you have no outcomes, if you have no product strategy, if you have nothing in your company that looks like what I was talking about, this is where I would start. Somebody tells you to build something, you're building this feature, go to leadership and say, cool. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to build this thing. What do you expect to happen when I release this? Like, what should change in our customers' behavior? Like, what are we going to do for our company? Like, do you expect to make more money? Do you expect to reduce costs? How much? How much do you expect to reduce costs? Like, start asking that question. That's the biggest question right there. Is like, what do you expect to happen? And try to quantify it. And if they say something that's more like, I expect it to be released and people use it, be like, okay, but how much should they use it? Why should they use it? Like if they use it, what do you think will happen? And start asking those questions. And I find that it makes a big shift in people's mindset. They're like, oh, I never really thought about that. Like I didn't sit back and do that. And just having those conversations, it's not confrontational. It's just enough to get people thinking about it, to get talking about it. That's what I see really happen. And if you ask that enough, people will start to say, oh, we don't really know, right? Like we have no idea why we should be building this. Hey, let's think about it. I actually had a student a couple of years back in a workshop, and she was working at a big bank. And after the workshop, she goes, I just realized that what we were building is probably not the right thing to build, but I'm afraid to go ask my boss because I think I'll lose my job. And she's like, but I think I'm going to have a conversation. So she went and she talked to her boss and she said, I don't think we should be building this. Here's why. And he said, you know what? You're right. Like, we don't actually have enough information to build it. It doesn't seem like the right thing to build. What should we be doing? And she said, I can go find out. And he said, good, do it. And she did. And she reset the entire direction for the company, like as a lower level product manager. So that's really important, right? Like that's a really good way to approach this. Don't be afraid of having benign conversations. I wouldn't come out saying like guns blazing. And I see a lot of people do this wrong. I did this wrong when I started, I'll tell you, and it did not win me any friends. Don't come out and just be like, you're doing everything wrong as leadership. They're going to be like, who are you and why are you yelling at me, right? So say instead, what do you expect to happen? Like start with the goals, like just, okay, cool, let's build it. What should happen? And then measure it, see if it actually does happen when you release it. This takes a while to get there. All right, next question. The time between delivery and measurement of outcome is sometimes long. What are your ways of measuring or estimating value immediately and numerically to help remove the need for velocity? So there are lagging indicators and there are leading indicators in all product metrics. Usage, for example, is a leading indicator, usually to a lagging indicator that might be like increase in revenue or increase in retention. What you need to do for all of your products is break down what are your leading indicators and what are your lagging indicators. How do we measure that and how do we define that into a system? I think John Cutler's North Star framework explains this beautifully. It's all online on Amplitude for free that you can read the book. It's called North Star Framework, just to put that back out there by John Cutler. But what you need to do is break down, like velocity doesn't really tell you an outcome, right? Like if you code faster, that doesn't usually increase retention, right? So it's like, what are you coding faster and what is that going to do? So there's product metrics, which are all about customer behavior of how they use your product. There are business metrics, which are the top line outcomes that we are trying to reach. So things like increase in revenue, decrease in costs, like all that side, better market share, all those things. And then there are health metrics of development teams, right? Of are we healthy enough to actually get to the product metrics that can get to the strategy metrics? And velocity is important. Like being able to release things frequently is important. I'm not saying it's not. It's just that we're using it as a proxy to measure outcomes, and that's not true. That's not what it's there for. So we have to separate like these development health metrics of how well is our team working together from what are our customers doing with our products that will lead to better business value. And that's what I would say is like, figure out what are your leading indicators. It could be usage. It could be how many times they do some different things in your platform. It could be decreasing the time it takes people to do things. Like you really have to sit there and figure out what do I need them to do right now? And what do I believe that's going to happen in the future? But it's all a hypothesis until it's actually proven. All right, can you share a list of measures that we could typically use? Okay, so like I just said, so we also on Product Institute, if you're interested, we just released a metrics course on breaking down these different types of metrics, like commercial metrics, strategic metrics, product metrics, development metrics, leading indicators, lagging indicators, and how they all work together. So there's a system of different ones. Product metrics are all about, usage and customer behavior and what people are actually doing in your product. It will be different for every single product. You have a utility product, which means like a workflow thing, like a Salesforce. It will be very related to time spent being able to track things and enter things into the system and helping people with their own workflow, doing their work, right? How do I empower people to do their work better? If you have a B2C company, it's going to be very different measurements. It's probably about engagement or things in there. But then they all lead to commercial metrics at the end of the day. Everything can be rolled up into cost and revenue. It's really hard sometimes to make that alignment, especially in large organizations. But if you have a strategy framework, that's how you kind of get up there. So you have to keep asking yourself why at the end of the day. Like, why do I want people to use my product more? What do I think it's going to do for them? Oh, I think it'll solve their problem better. Okay, once we solve their problem better, what do we think it'll do for us? Oh, it'll make us more money, right? Like there's a chain that goes up and up and up. And that's the thing that you have to follow through. All right, according to SAFe, market segment drives product strategy. Do you agree? How does segmenting the potential product market fit into product strategy framework approach of your keynote? SAFe is not my favorite thing in the world. I will tell you that first. It's also built by a bunch of people who never did product management before. So I'll tell you this, market segments is a big piece of product strategy, but it's not the only piece of product strategy. For instance, if you upsell and cross-sell in your same market segment, you can increase the amount of money that you make in a product strategy without having to go into a new market. So it's not all just about market segmentation, although I do think market segmentation has a big piece to do with product strategies. We actually had we have like a 16, I'll see if I can find it, drop the link in here, 16 strategies for product management. I'll send you an article. I'll drop it in here. Sorry, I'm going to Google it in the background over here for product growth. Here it is. Great. So our VP of product at Products Labs, Tammy, wrote this article about our 16 strategies for product growth right here. There's a bunch of stuff in there. There is increasing, there is increasing TAM. There's adding new logos. There's getting up more people in your current market. There's increasing retention. There's decreasing costs. It's not just about market segmentation, although a lot of this could be market segmentation, but you can also drive a lot of revenue and drive a lot of strategy within the current market that you're in. It's not about necessarily having to go into a different market. So I'd say you can expand your horizons there, especially for different types of market product strategy. But hopefully that, I just popped the link in the chat, but hopefully that can help you with thinking about different product strategies. All right, one more. So you spoke about analytic tool to figure out UI problems in the food delivery company you worked with. How can you figure out such problems on a Windows app where such tools do not exist? I honestly don't know. The best thing, there are not many tools from what I understand with that. But the best thing to do, I think, is doing a lot of user research, guided user research or unguided, where you're screen sharing with people and you watch them go through the UI and you see if there's patterns to do that. We still do that, by the way, with any kind of B2B or B2C company. I'd recommend, for the last couple of years with consulting, one of the big things that we would do with the user researcher when we would come into companies is help them with what we would call like a deep insight sprint. And we'd line up something like 20 or 30 people who use the product and just like watch them use it and ask them about it, ask them questions about it. And that's where I would start and try to figure out, where does everybody have the same pain points? It's definitely more manual, but it's going to give you the same type of results. The reason Qualaroo worked for us is that we didn't know who the people were to get in touch with them to see where the problems were. So when you do have like a Windows app where you know people are downloading it, I would just go directly to the customers. When do you feel the chain of growth should stop? I'm not really sure what that question means, so I'm going to go to the next one. But if you want to clarify that, I'll answer that next. How do you position product strategy within the organization strategy? So I believe there is always a company strategy. So there's always an organization strategy, and it depends on what kind of company you are. The strategy for what I would call a tech-enabled services company or a tech-enabled company, things like your banks, things like where you don't have a traditional software product that you're selling directly to your company, to your customer. It's more like I sell a credit card or I sell a loan. Those are called tech-enabled companies. Their strategies are usually about how their product strategies, let's put this, are more about how they manifest the business strategy by allowing them to provide better services or streamline the way they deliver those products to customers. But it's interesting because you're starting to see in this industry that you can't get a loan, you can't get by just innovating on some of those products itself. Like, you can make a great credit card, but if you can't manage that credit card through a phenomenal application and pay your bills and lock your credit card when it's stolen, all those things, people will go to a different company. And there's choices out there. So it's not just about making the best financial product anymore, right? And that's where product strategy comes into play. How can we enhance those traditional products that we typically sell in a way that's more innovative and more convenient for the customer and provides better value? That's how I would think about that. Now, if you are a SaaS business where you literally sell a software product to somebody, like you are selling Zoom is a software product, right? Like you are selling Salesforce, like your software as a service. Now, that is all about, the 16 product strategies for growth in there. Like, your strategy for your product is going to be very similar to your strategy for your company. They're going to be very intertwined until you get bigger and you have a portfolio of products that are almost different business lines. And then you'll have a corporate strategy on top of it. So the way that I think about it is you have this company strategy that's all about market-facing opportunities. And do you want to go up market or down market, or cross-sell or upsell, or like, what's the way that we can grow, right? Like, what do we need to do to grow? What do we need to do to innovate? What do we need to do to compete? And then your products really help you entwine that and figure out what can we do through technology to do that. And if you are a SaaS product company, it's probably going to be more about those products than it is. And if you're a tech-enabled company, it's going to be a combination of your software product strategy and your actual traditional product strategy together. So they're going to be combined. And I think that's it for time. All right, so we're at 10 o'clock. We ended on time. But thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to keep popping in chat and I'll check them out later. Or follow me on Twitter at LissyJean. Happy to answer questions there too. All right. Thanks, everyone.